Relocation is something that when Vedic astrologers want to do it, they jump onto the Western bandwagon and use Western astrology relocation techniques. That's really no surprise because relocation is really such a new idea. I don't believe relocation astrology is something that was practiced by ancient Western astrologers or even medieval Western astrologers. As far as I'm aware, it's, relocation astrology is a very new concept in astrology anywhere. So as a result, there's really nothing on the topic in any of the ancient texts from anywhere in the world that I've seen, and certainly not in, for the most part, in any of the Hindu texts. However, there is one text where I did find a little bit of information on relocation principles. And that book is Muhurta Chintamani. It's a good-sized book based on Muhurta. It also deals with predicting world affairs, and also has a little chapter where half that chapter is devoted to determining whether living in a particular city will be beneficial for you, and what part of that city will be beneficial. So what area of that city you should live in. Today we're going to cover a pretty solid technique about helping us find what city you should move in, and also to see the effect of the city that you do live in. And this technique, Muhurta Chintamani tells us to calculate something called the Kakini for yourself and for the city. And the Kakini is a coin, and we're going to calculate basically how much coins you have while in that city and how much coins the city is going to get. And you want to live in a city where you're getting more coins than the city. Otherwise, you draw a deficit. If you have more coins in the city, then you reap a good profit and rewards while living in that city. Now, Kakini is a coin, so this is literally a technique that's focused around money. But like we like to say, time is money. So I've also found this technique to also work for time too. Like, do you feel like in the city, if the city has more coins than you, that means the city is not only taking your money, but also possibly just taking a lot of your time. And so you might actually be able to live well in that city, but the amount of time you'll have to spend to be able to live well in that city, the amount of time you'll be dealing with work and issues, will undervalue the amount of money you actually do make. So this technique really lets us see if overall it's worth living in that city based on the time you have to do what you love and having enough money to do what you love. And you have to look at it in that context. When we see some examples, you'll see examples of when a person lived in cities where they really didn't make much money, but they had so much time, they really enjoyed living in that city, and they chose time over money. So time and money are pretty much the same thing that we're measuring here. And you want to make sure the city gives you more time and money than you give the city. So to calculate the Kakinis, we have to know the first letter of the person's name and the first letter of the city's name. And we relate that to a particular number. So all the vowels are related to number 1. Okay, any and all vowels. And vowels also happen to be ruled by the sun. Now, Muhurta Chintamani doesn't get into the planets and that rule the letters, but I'm going to go a little step beyond what he talks about and give you some ideas of how we can use those planets for some helpful information as well. So, number 1 is the vowels. Any vowel is a number 1. So, if your name starts with the vowel, the number you're going to start for determining your Kakinis is number 1. Okay. Mars rules what's called velars or gutturals, and those are the hard sounds like k, g, and d. These hard guttural sounds that you make the sound in your throat. Okay. Those are ruled by Mars and have the number 2. All those letters give you a number 2 as a beginning point. Number 3, and ruled by Venus, are the palatals. Palatals are the sounds that we make when the tongue is pressed towards the sides of our mouth, like Chuck or Jane or and things like that. And the N sound as in puncha. So any sound where you consciously notice the sides of your tongue pressed, or your tongue presses towards the sides of your mouth, that's a palatal sound, which is a number 3 sound. The hardest thing about this technique is making sure you get the right sound. Okay, you get the right number for the right sound. And with little practice, you'll understand it really well. Okay, Mercury rules retroflexes. Retroflexes are T's and D sounds and N sounds that are made when the tongue turns back towards the back of the palate. Okay, any sound that you make with the tongue turning back towards the palate is a Mercury sound. Now, these type of sounds are not very common in English. Most of the T's, D's, and N sounds we use in English are dental, which are the next category. But retroflex sounds are number 4, ruled by Mercury. If you can't decide if the T is a D, if the T sound is a number 4 T sound or a number 5 T sound, just say the name over and over again and just pay attention to where your tongue is. If your tongue reaches more forward, it falls into the dental category, even if it doesn't touch your teeth. And if your tongue moves more backwards, it's a retroflex category. In English, it's hard to tell lots of times because in English, we don't go all the way forward. Like in India, when they say the retroflex T sound, their tongue really goes back. And it's a very distinctively different T or D sound. And then when they say the other type of T or D, they really reach their tongue forward and touch practically the back of their teeth. We go a little back. In the English language, we go a little back or a little forwards with our tongue. If the tongue's reaching forwards, it's a dental T or D, and if the tongue reaches back, it's a number 4. Okay, so I kind of jumped ahead here, but the 5th number, number 5, rules or equivalates to the dental T's and D's and N's. That's when the tongue reaches towards the front teeth as it makes those sounds. Most of the English T's, D's, and N's tend to have the tongue reaching forward. Okay? So if in doubt, in English language, use a dental number 5. But really try to see which way your tongue's going, back or forth. For Hindu-speaking people and Indian stuff and people with Hindu names and Sanskrit names, it'll be real easy for them to know if it's a retroflex T or D or N or a dental T, D, or N because they spell it the right way. Okay? In English, we've got one letter that is used for either sound. Number 6 is labials. Okay? Any sound we make where the lips are pressed together, like m or ba, where we put the lips together, or an F sound, fa, PH sound, which is the F sound, or pa, as in Paul. Anything where the lips are pressed together is a labial sound, equivalates to Saturn and the number 6. Then the moon rules a bunch of sounds, the semi-vowels, which are sort of vowel sounds but not completely vowel sounds, and they're basically consonant letters that can make a vowel sound in the right position. Okay? And those are the semi-vowels. So in one, sometimes the Y will be like a vowel sound, like in jelly. The Y at the end of jelly is a vowel sound, and we would call that like a semi-vowel letter. But it's given us vowel sound in that context. And then in the if we had it at the beginning, a Y at the beginning, it would be a ya sound. And that's a semi-vowel sound, okay? Let me rephrase that a little bit. The Y at the end of jelly is an E sound. It's a vowel sound, okay? We spell it with Y, but we have to go with the sound. It's a vowel sound. It's not a semi-vowel sound. The point I was making, in the English language, letters that have semi-vowel sounds, sometimes in the way we spell in English, we'll use those to replace a vowel when we really should be using a vowel letter. Jelly should really be spelled Jell, E or something, not Y. But so Y as in young, or Udahishtra or Yancey, anything like that, that's a semi-vowel. Okay? And then R, La, and Va. Those sounds are the semi-vowels. Then there's the sibilants, which are basically the S sounds, and the aspirate, which is the H sound, like Harry. Okay? Now, the number 7 is the Y, R, L, or V sounds. And number 8 are the S sounds and the H sounds. And those are all ruled by the moon. Okay? So, depending if you have a different language, or you speak an Afrikanese language or some other language, Native American language, basically a language that doesn't use Roman characters or which doesn't use Hindu characters or Sanskrit characters, then what you need to do is you just need to see which sound it is and see how it's made, and that's how you determine the letter we're talking about. So it's the sound that's important, not the letter. Okay? Not the spelling, it's the sound. So you find the first sound of the city, and you find the first sound of your first name. Okay? So here, to determine the Kakini. To determine the Kakini of the person, double the number of the first letter of the individual's first name, and add the number of the first letter in the name of the city. Divide by 8, taking the remainder as the amount of coins the individual will gain. Well, let's take someone who's living in Los Angeles, and let's say their name is Kelly. So we're going to take Kelly living in Los Angeles. The K sound is a guttural. It's the number 2. So Kelly's name is number 2. Los Angeles is down here into the semi-vowels, La. It starts with an L sound. So we got the L for Los Angeles, which is 7. So we're going to put 2 here for the person as the first sound, and a 7 here for the city sound. So first thing we do is we double the number. So 2 plus 2, let's see, I'll just write it down. So plus 2 equals 4. So we double the number, 2 plus 2. Then we add the number of the first letter in the name of the city, which is 7. So we go plus 7 equals 11. Then we divide it by 8 and take the remainder, which indicates the coins. 11 divided by 8 equals 1, remainder 3, right? So 3 is going, in this example, is going to be the Kakini of the person. Okay? Now, to determine the Kakini of the city, we do the same thing. Double the number of the first letter of the city's name. So it's 7 plus 7 equals 14. Add the number of the first letter in the name of the individual, which was 2. So 14 plus 2 equals 16. Then divide it by 8. Divided by 8 equals 2, right? Well, 2 is the same as 1, remainder 8. So when there is no remainder, the remainder is 8. So 8 is the number of the city. So in this case, the city is getting 8 points, or 8 Kakinis, 8 coins, and the individual is getting 3 Kakinis, which would mean for someone with the K sound, Los Angeles would not be the ideal place to live. Okay? Or any city that lives with an L. So, to do this, what I find works really well when you're working with a person is just to fill out a table, okay, where we do the whole city. For example, we're going to do mine, because I've lived in, like 15 different places. I've lived in too many places. And so I'm a good example for this, good guinea pig. So, Ernst starts with an E. So my vowel, that's an vowel, which is number 1. Okay? So now what we're going to do, we're going to calculate the Kakini for all the possible sounds. There's only 8 possible sounds for me in each city. So Ernst is 1. You double it, you get 2. So 1 plus 1 equals 2. And then to that 2, I have to add the name of the city. So if the name of the city starts with the vowel, I would add a 1. 2 plus 1 is 3. 3 divided by 8 is, well, can't go into 8. 0 remainder 3. So my Kakini, when it comes to being in a place that's ruled by a vowel, would be number 3. Okay? Now let's do a guttural. In a guttural, I have to go 1 plus 1 equals 2. I'm going to do that for every one. I always double the number of my first letter. Okay, so that's always going to be 2. This time I go 2 plus 2 equals 4. Divided by 8 is 0, remainder 4. Okay. Palatals, to get that, I again go 1 plus 1 equals 2. Plus 3 equals 5. 8 divided into 5 is 0, remainder 5. Okay. Now, next is retroflexes. 1 plus 1 again is 2. Plus 4 equals 6. 8 won't divide into 6, so the remainder is 6. Now we do the dentals, which is number 5. 1 plus 1 equals 2 again, plus 5 equals 7. Dentals, my Kakini would be a 7. Now 1 plus 1 going to the labials at 6. 1 plus 1 equals 2, plus 6 equals 8. 8 divided into 8 is 8, remainder 0, which means the remainder is 0. Okay, so it goes into 8. With semivowels, which is number 7, we go 1 plus 1 equals 2, plus 7 is 9. 8 divides into 9 one time, remainder 1. So my Kakini for semivowels, YRLV sounds, is 1. Sibilants and aspirates is number 8. 1 plus 1 equals 2. 2 plus 8 equals 10. 8 divides into 10 once, remainder 2. So you see how this sort of works. The Kakinis increase. It goes 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2. And you'll always find a pattern like that. So if you make a mistake, it's pretty visible usually, okay, if it breaks the pattern. Now, let's do the city and see what happens in a city. Okay, we've determined my Kakinis here, and now we need to figure out the city's Kakinis to compare them. So in the vowel city, if the city starts with a 1, then we get 1 plus 1 equals 2. Then we add 1 plus 1, which is my Kakini, which is number 1, or not my Kakini, but my first letter, and we get 3. 3 divided by 8, or 3 divided by 8 is 0, remainder 3. Okay, so if the number of the city and the person are both number 1, obviously the city's Kakini and the person's Kakini is going to be the same. So you'll break even if you live in a place where the name of the city starts with the same sound as your first name. Okay, so that's an easy one. Okay, now the gutturals. Gutturals is number 2. We double it and get 4. Then we add 1, which is my base number based on the vowel. That equals 5. 8 divided into 5 is 0, remainder 5. So the city's Kakini for gutturals is a 5. Okay, now let's do the palatals. Palatals is number 3. We double it. 3 plus 3 equals 6. Then we add 1, which is my number, and that gives us 7. 8 divided into 7 is 0, remainder 7. Okay, retroflexes are number 4. We double 4. 4 plus 4 is 8. Plus 1 equals 9. Divide 8 into 9, we get 1. Remainder 1. Okay. Then we've got the dentals here, which is 5. 5, we double 5, we get 10. We add my base vowel number, which is 1, we get 11. Divide 11 by 8, we get 1 times remainder 3. Okay, 8 goes into 11 once with the 3 remainder. Then labials is number 6. Double number 6, oops, and we get 12 plus 1, which is my base number, equals 13. Divide 13, or 8 into 13, we get 1, remainder 5. Okay. Semivowels, number 7, double 7, we get 14. Add my base number to it, equals 15. 8 into 15 is once, remainder 7. Okay. Sibilants is number 8. We double 8, we get 16, plus my base number equals 1, so a total of 17. And we divide that by 8, and we get 8 goes into 17 twice, which equals 16, with remainder 1. Okay. Okay, and we could tell if we made a mistake again if there's not a pattern. 3, 5, 7, 1. 3, 5, 7, 1. All right, there's a pattern there. If you see something that breaks the pattern, then you know you've made a typo somewhere, a miscalculation. Looks like we got lucky the first time. So here we can see now the Kakini of me in every city and the city's Kakini when I'm in there. Okay, vowels are going to be equal. Won't get ahead, won't fall behind. In a guttural place, I'll get 4 coins, but the city is going to get 5 coins, which means I'll run a deficit of time and money in any city that starts with a guttural. Okay, G sound, K sounds, or the hard N sounds, which you never really see this hard N at the beginning of a letter. So it's really, you really don't see this hard N in the English language at the beginning of a letter. Even in Sanskrit, it's really just in the middle. It's the sing sound as in sing, the N sound as in sing, that kind of ning sound, kind of a guttural N. So you don't have to worry about that N. K and G's I would run a deficit of 1 coin. Okay. Palatals would be, I would get 5 coins. The palatal place would get 7 coins. So living in a place that's cha or ja, again, this nya sound doesn't really fall at the beginning of any words. This is always in the middle, so we don't have to worry about that. But cha and jas would run a deficit of 2 coins. And I know this is a C here, but this is a cha C, which is how you say it, cha. It's not ka as in cat. Cat starts with a K. It's just English people misspell cat every time they write it, okay? It's the sound that's important. This is cha sounds, kind of like the Italians do it properly, okay? In most cases. I think sometimes the Italians at the beginning of a letter will spell it wrong. It will use the C sound different. That's what's nice about Sanskrit. There's actually enough letters for every sound. In other languages, there's not enough letters to cover all the sounds. And so you run into these weird things. But always pay attention to the sound. This is cha, palatal cha, as in chuck. This is actually the chuck sound. This is the chuck sound. It's a little different. So it's C and J sounds. Cha and ja are palatals. Not good living in those places. Retroflexes, when the tongue reaches back to make a T, D, or N sound. Any city with that letter, I would get 6 Kakinis, and the city would just get 1. So that would be a rockin' city for me to live in. Okay, a lot of extra time and money if I lived in that kind of place. Dentals, when the tongue reaches towards the teeth to make a T, D, or N sound, which is the more common ones used in English language. My Kakini is 7, the city's Kakini is 3. So those would be places I'd get, again, in excess of time and money. Labials, which are P, F, B, and M sounds, P, F, B, and M sounds, basically. My Kakini is 8, and the city Kakini is 5. So I'd also get ahead there. So basically, these are the 3 places so far that I want to live in, because those are the places I would tend to get ahead in. I'll just accentuate those a little bit. Okay. Living in a semi-vowel place, a Y, R, L, or V sounding place, or W, V sound is a semi-vowel. We actually, in Sanskrit, the V sound is kind of like a VW mixture. Okay. My Kakini would be 1. The city's Kakini would be 7. So that would be a disastrous place to live. Okay. Lot of loss of time and money. The sibilants are the S sounds and the H sound. In a sibilant place, my Kakini would be 2, and the city's Kakini would be 1. So again, we come ahead a little bit in that place. So this would, vowels would be equal, gutturals, palatals, and semi-vowels. I'd run a deficit in any city starting with those letters. In cities starting with T, D's, N's, B's, M's, F sounds, or P sounds, I would get ahead, as well as places that start with S and H. Okay, so there you could recommend a person if they're having trouble in a city, maybe financially and can't manage their time, are always stressed for time and money, or one or the other. Maybe they have enough money, but they have to spend so much time making it, they have no time to spend it. Then relocating to a different city making the changes in their life that move requires may help clear things up for them. Okay. Now, how does this work in practice? That's the fun thing. Well, let's find out. I've lived in a lot of places in my life. Okay, these are all the places I can remember I lived in. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 places that I've lived in. Starting at the vowel sounds, I've lived in 2 places with vowel sounds, Escondido and Encinitas. Vowel sounds, if we remember right, my Kakinis 3 and my city Kakinis 3. I'd have to say in both those places, I had a lot of time to get a lot of astrological studies done. Really plenty of time to do a lot of work. I did a lot of writing, wrote a book out of Escondido, wrote tons of partial books that were later turned into books, had lots of time for research in both those places. I never had a lot of money though. I was always stressed for money. But that's because I chose to spend my time studying instead of making money. So it was like stress for money, but getting time for studies. So my time was good, money was bad. But overall, I'd say it balanced about equal. I couldn't have stayed in either of those places forever because I would have never gotten ahead, but I was definitely not running a deficit. So both those places I would say came true. So we're going to bold these up or underline these guys, let us know that worked good on those places. Then I think when I was like 19 or 20 or so, I lived in a place called Crockett. Crockett is, if we look here, that's a K sound, guttural, Crockett. It's a K sound of this K, even though it's spelled C. My Kakini there is a 4. The city's Kakini is a 5. Okay. Well, what happened there is actually I moved there when I was still bike racing, and I moved there to focus on training and racing. But actually, after a while, I got more into just working and shifted away from bike racing at that time and started studying metaphysics. But it was so expensive to live there that I was working really hard to make ends meet. And so I didn't have quite as much time as I wanted to study, and not enough time to really do as much martial arts as I wanted between how much work hours I had to do. And so since I was running a little deficit in time and money, I eventually moved out of Crockett. Okay, and you can see my Kakini was a 4, the city's Kakini was a 5. So in that place, I'd have to say, yeah, Crockett, the C sound came out pretty accurate. Okay, then I lived in a place called China Lake for about 4.5 years. Cha. Okay, that's not China Lake, that's China Lake, which makes it where is that? Which makes it a palatal. Okay, I put these in order. In a palatal place, my Kakini is a 5. The city's Kakini is a 7. So China Lake, how was that? I was pretty young at that time. I definitely had more money than my friends. I actually worked, but then I had less time to play with my friends. I spent a lot of time focused training, doing martial arts. A lot of my weekends were taken up doing things I didn't want to do that I had to do with my, basically I had to go on torturous 12-hour hikes when I wanted to do other things, which in the end turned out to be good for me. I'm glad I had to do 12-hour torturous hikes instead of watching TV at my friends' houses on the weekends. But overall, it was a deficit, not that as much as you'd expect here. I would say in China Lake, I would say, considering I had more money, considering I had quite a bit of time for my hobbies, I was getting ahead that way. In other ways, things that I wanted to do with friends that I was into doing, they were always less into doing. So there was definitely some, social expenditure there where I was like not getting the rewards from, the people I wanted to do things with at a time in life where it's really, that's sort of what your life revolves around. And I lived in that place from the age of 11 to 15. Things I was into, the people I knew who were into those things would never be into it as much as me, so it's always disappointing to do those things with them because they weren't as focused. So there was a deficit there, but otherwise I'd say, yeah, I had enough time really, even with those missing those weekends, to develop a lot of skills and work on a lot of hobbies I was into. And so I would say in China Lake, I wouldn't say that technique worked. Okay, so China Lake, we're not going to underline. I would say I feel overall like I came ahead in that place in every respect except spending time with friends. But financially and time-wise, even with, like I said, torturous hikes, I would not agree with what the Kakini says. And so we're going to see here how accurate this technique is. And no technique's 100% accurate, but you're going to find this technique's accurate enough to, if you bet on it, you'll get ahead more often than not. Then I lived most of my life, I've lived in places, a large portion of my life, with the Saturn sounds, the labial sounds, the buzz, the F sounds, the P sounds, and the M sounds. That's been the majority of my life. You notice I've never lived anywhere with the 4 sound or number 5 sound. And we'll get back to why that was. Okay, Bozeman. Let's see what number 6s do first, okay? In number 6s, my Kakinis an 8, and the city's Kakinis a 5. So living in Bozeman, I'm going to get ahead, supposedly. Okay? Now, any of these places I should get ahead. Well, Bozeman is when I was bike racing. I got sponsored. I had plenty of time to train. I had plenty of money to buy the latest bike equipment and racing fees. I had enough credits that my last half, I had enough credits at high school that I was able to get out of school at 12:30 every day and spend the rest of the day training when everyone else was still sitting in school for 2 hours. And then I had plenty of money, and since I was sponsored, I didn't need to buy a whole bunch of bike junk. So I'd say Bozeman was definitely a place where my Kakinis were getting ahead. Then I lived in Flamingo Heights for a few years, 4 years. That was a very productive time during which I wrote 2 books, made plenty of money, had very low expenses, and definitely got ahead. I'd say during that period, my income doubled while living in there during that 4-year period. And my time, I had lots of time. When I lived there, I had so much time, in fact, that I was teaching 2 phone conference courses a week during a large portion of my time living there. So the Kakinis definitely proved that being very favorable. Currently, I'm in Prescott, where I moved here about 7 months ago. Since I moved here, my expenses have dropped in half, and my income actually went up. So yes, my Kakinis have been kicking in Prescott. Let's see, in Milwaukee, I moved to Milwaukee for a year to do martial arts. And I had to work a lot. I was working 40-hour-week job to make ends meet. I wasn't getting paid a lot at the job, but I still managed to put some money away. I trained 25 hours a week, so basically I was working, sleeping, or training but I really enjoyed it and felt like I got a lot out of it. Financially, I did lose a little because I loaned a lot of money to my martial arts instructor who was having some financial troubles, and I never did get that money back. It was like $2,000 or $1,500, but back then, I was working for $450 an hour, and $1,500 at $450 an hour is a lot of hours. So I'd say, yeah, Milwaukee, I had all the time I wanted to do what I wanted to. I had all the money I needed to do what I needed. Any extra money, I gave it away. But I had all the time I needed. So on this one, I wouldn't say Milwaukee, I felt like I really came ahead, but I certainly didn't fall behind. So I would give that not a negative, but a mid accuracy. Okay. Now in these three places, we definitely came ahead in all three of those places. As a kid, I lived in a place called Melrose. Melrose was a beautiful place. I had plenty of time, all in all. I actually had money. I did earn a little bit of money to buy the little toys that a kid wants when he wants to live there. And I would say Melrose was definitely a time of getting ahead as well. I spent a lot of time developing the skills kids wanted to develop at that age. Did a lot of reading and did a lot of crafts, and was totally healthy. Don't remember. I think that was probably the healthiest period of my childhood, come to think of it. After I left there, my health was not as strong, surprisingly. So I'd give that a thumbs up, as the Kakini indicated. Lived in Fort Collins, where I grew up. Fort Collins, I remember being the best period of my childhood for sure. Lots of free time, lots of good family time, everything a kid could want. Really cool friends next door. Pretty perfect. And I was taken care of. All my friends were older than me. I was, literally a 6 to 8 year old playing with kids who were 5 years older than me, and giving me toys and helping me with crafts and giving me lots of freebies. So that definitely was a thumbs up period, and where the city gave a lot to me, considering I hardly put anything out. Then I lived in Missoula, Montana for a while. In Missoula, I worked 1 week a month. The rest of the time I spent doing yoga and martial arts and studying health and nutrition, and was able to make ends meet. And had so much free time. I've never had that much free time. So definitely the city was given to me then. Then I lived in the Pacific Palisades for a little while. Pacific Palisades was during the worst dasha of my life, practically, where I really had no job, no money, no nothing. But I miraculously was still able to manage to pay rent somehow. I mean, literally miraculously things happened where I was able to pay my expensive rent, living in the Pacific Palisades, make ends meet, get a really good reputation as a massage therapist working with athletes on the road. And it basically became a base that I traveled from to races where I worked with athletes for a while. And it's where I started studying astrology, where I basically just sat on my couch all day studying astrology when I should have been making money. So during the Pacific Palisades, I chose time over money, but still miraculously managed to get enough money to pay for my studio, which cost a fortune in Pacific Palisades, one of the more expensive places to live in LA. Had plenty of time to exercise, ride my bike, swim in the ocean, working very little and lots of time and still making ends meet. So definitely a thumbs up on that, just as the Kakini indicated. Now there's the interesting thing is, then I lived in Pinole. Pinole is right next to Crockett. And you see in Crockett, I drew a deficit. When I lived in Crockett, I worked at a bike shop called the Peddler. Peddler. It's a P sound again. When I went back there a year later, I left Crockett, and a year later, or 2 years later, I came back. But at that point, I lived in Pinole, a P sound. At that point, I got paid way more working at the bike shop. I had way less rent, and I had lots of time to study, to do fun things, to exercise. Spent most of my time studying. I lived there for about 2 to 3 years while I was, basically concentrating on studying astrology full time with the intention of being an astrologer. So, you know, definitely that was a thumbs up place. Okay. Where Pinole gave a lot to me. Great rent in a beautiful neighborhood where I was literally paying hardly anything for rent. A job where I was actually getting paid a decent amount, because the second time I went back to work at the same place, the owner knew how productive I could be in the bike shop. So I got paid like twice what I did when I lived there in Crockett, when he didn't know who I was and I was just some guy off the street begging a job. And the time I called him for this job, he really needed someone in the shop. So it worked out really good for me. Again, it's amazing what a little different letter in your residence will do. Same job, same Bay Area, just a different residence. And I'm way ahead of schedule in Pinole. I worked less than I did when I lived in Crockett and had more money, and therefore more time to do things. Okay. So Pinole was a thumbs up. Then I lived in Yakima, which was the past 4.5 years before I got here. And everyone who knows me knows that after I moved to Yakima, my productivity kind of went down the tubes. I didn't write any books. I taught one phone conference class a week. I was always stressed for time. And that's because the house I owned just required me to do so much stuff to get the yard up to shape. And I was constantly pressed for time. It was just ended up being a miserable experience. Now, what does number 7 pan out to be? Well, number 7, my Kakini is a 1, and the city's Kakini is a 7. And, you know, we wanted to buy a house. We liked the area. We liked the neighborhood. We liked the people. We moved there. And we ended up losing a ton of money in interest payments over the 4.5 years we owned our house. You know, if I'd rented, I could have rented a house that was the same nice and left Yakima with $50,000 more than I left with. I basically left Yakima with no profit, but no debt. I was able to pay all my debts off, cover everything, but having spent all this time, you know, dealing with stuff on that house where I would have rather been working on astrology stuff. So Yakima was definitely a negative. You know, that was certainly the most stressful period of my life, especially 4.5 years of it. So we were so glad to get out of there. From Yakima, we went to a PA. You know, after Yakima, I started thinking I need to pay more attention to this technique. I've known this technique for like 8 years. But I just kind of got stupid and moved to Yakima. I guess I was in a bad dasha. I like how, what is it? Jataka Purjata says, when you're good dasha, your brain wakes up and causes you to do the things that make you successful. And when you're in a bad dasha, you get stupid and you do things that make you have trouble in your life. He doesn't say it in those exact words, but that's the idea. And that certainly was sort of the Yakima experience for us. So that was a big deficit. Then I lived in Springfield. That's the S sound. That's a sibilant. My Kakini there is a 2. The city Kakini is a 1. So in Springfield, we would expect me to get ahead. And I did get ahead. That was Springfield, Texas. I lived there as a bike racer to race where it was warm because get out of Montana and train. I was very lucky there. I just had to work a few hours in the morning for room and board. I got a sponsorship onto, you know, one of the biggest teams in the country there. Free bikes, free entrance fees. Was really taken care of as a result of living in Springfield, Texas. So that was certainly a thumb up. So here we've gotten 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 places. Now, the times it didn't work. Okay, Yakima was bad as the technique showed. So we're going to underline that. China Lake showed bad, but I feel like it actually was pretty good. Milwaukee showed good, but you know, I would say overall I felt like I lost a lot in that area. Really close in both areas, but I would lean towards the opposite of what the technique said. So in 2 out of 15 times, I would say the technique was not completely accurate. I wouldn't say it totally failed. Like I said, all the time I needed to do what I wanted in Milwaukee, I just loaned a lot of money to someone that I never got back. But I still had all the money I needed to get through. You know, it's not like I didn't have money. You know, I was living on a shoestring, but I did it on my own choice, sort of. In China Lake, I had plenty of money and time, but socially was not getting my social thrills from my friends. So, and well, as it showed, I should really be falling behind, and I didn't. So I'd say these two are not completely accurate. So 2 times out of 15, well, how bad is that? It worked 13 times divided out of 15. So the technique worked out on 15 places I've lived to 86% accuracy. That's a damn good technique. We haven't even looked at dashes or anything. That's a solid technique. So this is a technique you can use. Okay? Now here's what's really interesting about this technique. And this is my own development of it, something that Mahurta Chintamani doesn't talk about. Okay, you notice how I never lived in a place with number 4 or number 5. Okay? I never lived in a 4 or 5 place. Number 4s are the retroflexes ruled by Mercury. Let's go up here. Okay, Mercury retroflexes. Never lived in a number 4 place. Okay? It's too bad because in number 4 places, my Kakini is a 6 and the city's Kakini is a 1. I should rock in a number 4 place. Out of 15 places I've lived, I haven't landed there once, which is unusual. But it's really not unusual if you consider that my weakest planet in my chart, the only planet that suffers a low Shadbala, is Mercury. And Mercury rules these retroflex sounds. So my weak Mercury has not allowed me to live, hasn't brought me to that. Because with the weak Mercury in Shadbala, I'm going to have less Mercury stuff in my life. But you're saying, yeah, but you're on the internet. Well, the internet's ruled by Rahu, right? That's why I'm on the internet. My Rahu's plenty strong, or his lord is anyway. So Mercury's weak, so I have less Mercury in my life. Therefore, there's a less likely chance I'll ever live in a place that's ruled by Mercury sound. Okay? Now, number 5 would be nice to live in because I get a 7 Kakini and the city gets a 3. So I'd get ahead in those places too. But I've never lived in a number 5 place, in a place that starts with a TD or N's type sound. Why is that? Well, number 5 is ruled by Jupiter. My Jupiter is really strong. But I still haven't done it. The reason is because there's Vedas with these sounds. Okay? The 5th sound from your sound is always a Veda. So look, 1, 2, 3, 4. Wait, I've just counted it wrong. Hold on, try that again. 1 vowels, 2 gutturals, 3 palatals, 4 retroflexes, and 5 dentals. So anything that starts with a T or D sound, a dental T or D, which is the more common English one, is going to be Veda with me, which means obstruction. So if I meet someone that has a T or D sound, invariably I never get to know them as well as I expected. There's a Veda, there's an obstruction there. And that's kept me from living in a T or D place. I cover that technique in the compatibility class that you can get on my other website, the one that a lot of you all have taken, where we do the compatibility based on the name. And that's actually an accurate technique to do too. So a Jupiter place would be beneficial for me. It could be a great thing for me. A person whose name starts with the Jupiter sound could be a really good person for me. But because it's Veda with me, I'm never actually going to get it. Veda doesn't mean a bad thing. It just means obstruction, which means there's an obstacle between you and the thing so you don't get there. So I've never ended up living in a Jupiter sounding place. Now, of all the places I could live, I'm 5 ahead in a retroflex place, but my weak Mercury never lets me get there. In a dental place, I'm 4 ahead, but I never get there because of the Veda. In a labial place, I'm 3 ahead, and that's where I've spent most of my life, luckily. Okay? In a labial place, which is the best place I can get. The other good place is a sibilant aspirate place where I'm just 1 ahead. So the best possible place I can live that I actually can get to is a labial place. If I can get to one of these places, I do better, but the thing is, I'm probably never going to be able to get to one. Okay? Actually, this reminded me of another P place I lived in. In Hawaii, I lived in a place called Pukolani. And that was also really successful and was well taken care of with plenty of time. there. And the other place I lived on Hawaii was Haiku with an H sound, and I got ahead there. So I had a wonderful time in Hawaii as a result. Okay. So and I actually remember I lived all over Hawaii, and I remember actually once for a short while, which was the most troublesome period that I lived there, where financially things were the most stressful. They're really the only bad times. I was living in Kihei, where I have a 4 Kakini and the city had a 5 Kakini. So you can see how this technique works pretty damn good, surprisingly for how simple it is. It's not even that astrological centered until you start looking at things like strong planets and weak planets. Okay? And you will see themes like this, where never ended up in a retroflex Mercury ruled place due to having a weak Mercury. So if a client comes to you and they want to live in a place ruled by a planet that's really weak, chances are it's not something that's really going to manifest in their destiny, even if it could give them a good destiny. So when you use this technique, don't just look at the Kakinis and say, oh, this is where you have to live. Look at that planet in their chart to see if that's really the best place for them. The best place for them is going to be the place that has more Kakinis going to them, so they draw a residual time and money, and where that planet is strong enough in their chart to actually get them there. Okay, and if you can do that, things will be pretty good. So Saturn is the places I'm living mostly, the labials here. I've always been very happy with my Saturn. I have a good Saturn. It's always very productive. So I'm not surprised I've spent, and it's relatively strong, and it is connected to my Karaka of land and residence, which is Mars. So I'm not surprised I've spent a lot of time in Saturn-type places. So that's how you use this technique. Everyone should take this worksheet that you have, fill out the bottom of the chart, write all your cities down that you've ever lived in, and give them a little thought and see how well this technique works in your life, and then you can start using it in the lives of other people. And once you have the table worked out, you have that to use anytime you need it. You just whip it out and check it out. And